This episode of Inside Golf Podcast is brought to you by Inside Sports Network.
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Boston Capital Tour, Steve, on the Hold the Green podcast.
All right, we are live. Tap in, birdie.
All right, Carson Young is here.
I bet Ludwig at 28.
Let's go.
I bet him at,
I bet him at 25.
Low sevens. I think there's some guys in here we like.
Harris English at 7,300.
I love Brian Harman at 3.5% this week.
What's up, guys? It's producer Cam here. ISN is now partnered with Shorty's Golf. Shorty's Golf is designed to provide kids with the perfect introduction to the game of golf by offering high-quality clubs and equipment specifically tailored to their need. They offer custom sizes for various age groups, ensuring that the kids have clubs that are tailored to their height and strength. They feature fun, vibrant colors and lightweight stand bags that are easily adjustable. Each set features real stainless steel clubs, high-quality materials, and sturdy construction, making them long-lasting while providing a real golf experience. So go check them out, golfshorties.com. Use ISN15 at checkout for $15 off your purchase.
Good evening, everybody. Steve Schirmer here on the Hold the Green podcast on the Inside Sports Network. Almost botched that. Hi, everybody. How you doing? Just me tonight. Boston Capper is still serving out the remainder of his suspension for the character assassination of Scottie Scheffler after the PGA Championship and just a professional golf in general. So he's sitting out still on the sidelines. So just me tonight, breaking down the Memorial for you. One of my favorite tournaments of the year. There's a lot to like about this week, not just the field, but the golf course, but the conditions that these guys are going to have to face. Some real tough conditions that usually are served to these pampered golfers this week. So a lot to get to tonight. Before I do that, congratulations to everybody who had Ben Griffin. Great bet this week. One of the last cuts on my card. I wish I had him. I was kicking myself all weekend, but that was a great bet by you guys. But in true Ben Griffin fashion, he put you through the ringer. It was the slow motion car wreck that we have seen from Ben over and over and over. Like we saw at the Bermuda Championship a couple of years ago, where just that back nine, he just starts leaking oil. He starts leaking tee shots, not very good approach shots. And we saw that at the Sanderson a couple of years ago too, where he blew a big back nine lead as well. And it just seemed like that was going to happen again, and Colonial, as we talked about, is a golf course that it's a high miss fairway penalty. And he started hitting some really bad tee shots and started kind of compounding on itself. But unlike those other times when Ben would just kind of fold and miss those putts, he had a lot of crucial 7-8 footers that he could just continue to bury over and over. And it helped. He also got a lot of help too. Matty Schmid, even though he chipped in for birdie on 18 to make it very interesting for a little bit. Look, he's Matty Schmid at the end of the day. There's a reason why the player, as I said, he stinks. And listen, he had a great performance this week. Kudos to anybody who played him in DFS. I don't know anybody who bet him. But, you had also Bud Cauley put in the water on 13. Tommy Fleetwood, there was a win definitely for Tommy this week. He spit all over himself on the back nine as well. Scottie just couldn't really ever get it going today either. But congratulations to Ben Griffin. Obviously he was he won a couple weeks ago at the Zurich, but this is his first solo win. Obviously it's going to mean a lot more to him getting his first solo win. Put that on the Wikipedia page. So congratulations to Ben Griffin, a guy who nearly quit golf. He was a mortgage loan officer for a while, just like my co-host that is not here tonight. He was in that field as well. So the two can kind of, commiserate with that occupation, but Ben got the big win. Good for him. So as far as my week, listen, not a great week. I had a pretty bad run out. But it is what it is. That's what happens with betting sometimes. Hadn't been my worst week of the year, but it didn't really feel like it. Bud Cauley was in the mix. You had Andrew Novak playing all right. A couple guys just really spit the bit today for positions, but that's it. Keep my head up. I actually feel pretty good. And I enter this tournament with a Memorial, pretty good track record. I feel like I have a pretty good handle on this place. And I'll show you actually tonight why I feel like I have a really good handle on this. even though there's a lot of car crashes at Muirfield Village with all the water and the high degree of missed fairway penalty, I feel like it's one of the more predictable tournaments on the PGA Tour schedule, just based on, when you look at data golf, what the course fit profile looks like versus what actually separates yourself in the tournament. There's a lot, that overlaps there. And I'll show you guys that tonight. I'll show you why Muirfield Village plays very tough. I'll show you specific holes. And I'm very much looking forward to it. It's going to be a little bit of a shorter show, because it's just me, rambling on. We're actually going to debut a new segment as well. We're going to try a little bit to get more hot takes, especially from Boston Capper too. Sometimes the Sunday shows are kind of dominated by my course previews. We want to try and let Capper kind of shine a little more. So we'll save some of these, colonial takes. I got some takes about the general golf world, maybe a Ryder Cup take that I want to unleash too. It's better to have him though. For that. We'll talk about that on Tuesday before we get to the betting board that week. But, before we get to the Muirfield Village preview, obviously I want to promote ISN. And while our content's free, and I love that you guys are really great supporters of us and listen and download, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to the Inside Sports Network. But also go and subscribe to our show on Spotify or Apple. Give us a 5-star rating as well. That always helps us too. But there's so much more than just my free show, or Andy's free show. There's a whole world at ISN that is just waiting for you. If you want to come become an insider with us, obviously access to our Discord. And it's not just minds like me and Andy and Ryan Baroff and Rishi and Kyle, and we're sharing our thoughts and what we think about the tournament, DFS strategy. That's more their lane than mine. I talk about more about betting and weather. All of that information is only there. And I'm not on Twitter. And that's the only place you can find my thoughts every single week is on Discord. And also just our community is very sharp, really great golf minds. We got a user named Devin every single week. For the last couple of weeks, he's been posting his thoughts about optimal tee shots at the golf course. That has been super helpful. That's only in our Discord as well. And it's just a good time. It's a good hang. Listen, if you want to sweat your bets, you got other people to sweat them with you. There's a lot of good shtick and jokes that fly around as well. It's a good time. So definitely go and subscribe. Go to Inside Sports Network, become an insider. And it's not just golf, by the way, that we got going on right now. Rishi, as I just mentioned, he is a tennis sharp, and we get the French Open coming up. He has been killing tennis all week this year, and we got a couple promos if you want to sign up to get his plays for the week. So if you want to get a weekly membership, use promo code GARROSWEEK, GARROSWEEK, get 25% off a weekly subscription. Or if you want to sign up for the monthly, get us all the way through the U.S. Open right before the Open Championship as well. Maybe get a little bit right before Wimbledon too. Just see how his tennis plays are playing out. Sign up using promo code GARROSMONTH for 25% off a monthly. Also, Andy and I, we post our models. We make expert models for each tournament on BetSports Golf using the rabbit hole. And we have our own promo code as well. If you want to make your own models, use promo code Inside Golf for 25% off with that code too. So go become an insider. You won't regret it. It's definitely the best community I've been a part of. So definitely recommend it. All right. Let's get to the Memorial preview. Here is Muirfield Village. This is the 18th hole. Muirfield Village was first opened in 1966. So after, this is Jack Nicklaus' design, and after his win at Murfield at the 1966 Open Championship, Jack Nicklaus, Ohio boy, went to Ohio State, local boy, and he wanted to create, not just honor that Open Championship win, but just create the finest golf course in the world with comps to Augusta National with similar conditioning. And so he bought a tract of land in Dublin, Ohio in 1966, and he started to build a golf community. Now, the golf course itself did not open until 1974, but in between that time, they were selling housing, to build up the community there. And then finally, in 1974, the golf course opened. So, and, look, like through the years, I've grown more to appreciate this golf course. In the architecture community, it's pretty easy to dunk on Jack sometimes. You know, a lot of his courses can be one note. One of the things that people rib on Jack is, you know, his propensity to build golf courses to favor faders, you know, because he had a fade, a lot of left to right tee shots. And, you know, it's in my earlier days, maybe some immature takes, I would kind of pile on with that as well. But, you know, this is Jack's baby. And especially with that 2020 renovation that he did to improve the golf course, you know, he was seeing about guys just hitting it miles and miles with the advancements in technology. And if the governing bodies weren't going to do anything about it, he was going to do something to his golf course. So he, after the 2020 Memorial, won by John Rahm. It was, you know, I remember watching that. He basically, that was the one where it was back-to-back weeks, and they knew they're going to rip the golf course, and they basically let Muirfield Village just go to hell. Kind of like how they let Colonial go to hell before they ripped up that golf course too in 2023. And he completely redid the golf course. So that was a couple of years ago. We'll talk about how that golf course is played over the last couple of years, but just as a reminder of what they did in that renovation. So these are the big changes that they made. So before 2021, it was a bentgrass POA mix. And in the renovation, they rebuilt all the greens and they resurfaced the full bentgrass right now. So it also had sub-air installed underneath all the green surfaces. That might come into play this week because it has been very wet in the Northeast. I played golf yesterday and I had to get punted off the course after 9 holes. It was that wet. There's some low spots in my club as well. Like they did a great job trying to get it prepped. There was a stable for a tournament that day, but man, like I lost 4 balls just because it plugged. It's been and that's been wet all across the Northeast. So that's something to keep in mind this week. I think there's more rain in the forecast, but there is sub-air. But the important thing to remember with sub-air, though, is that it only makes surfaces playable. You need Mother Nature elements to make it truly firm. Now, you know, they're going to double cut and roll the greens, get these out fast, but, you know, you need some sun, you need some wind to really dry it out like the greens have been the last couple of years. And sub-air can help with that process, but you do need some Mother Nature elements to help with that too. So that's something to watch this week, but there is sub-air on under these greens. Almost every single green was recontoured and reshaped. The only greens that weren't altered as far as shape were holes number 12, 13, 14, and 17. There were new tee boxes added to Muirfield Village that added about 100 yards in distance on the scorecard. So it's plays about 7,500 yards on the scorecard. I'll actually flip to the GCSAA report so you can see this. All fairway and greenside bunkers were completely rebuilt and shifted. And later on in 2023, there were new tee boxes added to number 7 and number 16. And then actually last year, because 16 has been kind of a polarizing hole, it's the par 3 over the water. It just seems like they always make little tweaks to it, and the players complain about how difficult it is to hold the green because of how firm the green is, the type of shot shape it commands. So last year, they actually shifted the tee box, I think, 15 yards to the right. And they removed the front bunker to try and promote more of a right to left shot into that green with a wider opening in front, hoping guys could kind of bounce the ball to make it a little more playable. So, you know, it's maybe they'll change it again if players, if Jack doesn't like it, players complain, but that hole seems like it always has a lot of tweaks as well. So as far as the agronomy goes, bentgrass greens, like I just mentioned, cut to 0.09 inches. Now, usually you see a lot of these, you know, specs on the GCSAA report. It'd be like 0.10 inches, 0.12 inches. This is 0.09 inches. So this is cut very tight. Jack likes to have his greens rolling very fast. There's a lot of undulation in the green as well. These are very tough putting surfaces to putt on. You know, they can be very fast if these things get extra crispy. Bentgrass fairways, bentgrass approaches, the rough. So Kentucky bluegrass, ryegrass, fescue mix at 4 inches is going to start at 4 inches. And with all the rain they've had, it's going to grow pretty thick. And I'll go over some of the stats for this tournament. There is a very high missed fairway penalty, very high penalty for hitting in the rough. And I'll show you why with some of the holes, exactly why that is. The only thing I want to mention with the GCSAA report that piqued my interest is the average fairway with this is new for this year. They haven't actually had this a bullet over the last couple of years, they added the average fairway width is 24 yards. Now, for the most part, at least where guys are playing to in the fairway, it is pretty generous at Muirfield Village, in between like 30, 35 yards. Some fairways can be like 40 yards, like as far as like where they're aiming for. So the fact that the average fairway width is 24 yards, a lot narrower than what is usually perceived as with Muirfield Village, it's kind of piqued my interest. I went back and looked at Google Earth. I think that's just measuring just the average fairway width from tee to green. And there definitely are holes where they bottleneck to 15 yards, 20 yards, that basically where Jack is trying to say, okay, you can take on this bunker, but it's a really narrow fairway. He wants you to lay back. I think that's where that smaller number is coming from. But being the curious auditor I am, kind of like with the rough questions I had at Quail Hollow, I'll try and reach out and see if I can actually confirm if there really aren't any changes to the fairways, and that just is measuring from the average from tee to green, or actually if there are changes. I did a Google search, did not find anything with any changes to the mowing lines this year, but I will follow up if I have to. And then the average green size, 5,000 square feet, same size as last week at Colonial, very small greens, very small targets. And that's why this is one of the more demanding tee to green golf courses on the PGA Tour. So let's get to the stats first. And like I just mentioned, tee to green, one of the toughest tests on the PGA Tour. It is one of the top 10 toughest off the tee over the last 3 years. I only went back to 2021 because that's when the renovation started. So looking back prior to 2020, I didn't feel it was very beneficial to you, but it tells the same story. One of the top 10 toughest in 3 of the last 4 years off the tee in Murfield Village. One of the top 5 toughest on the PGA Tour the last 4 years, including the toughest last year and the year before that. We had really firm greens the last 2 years, and it just made it very tough with those conditions, hitting approach shots, getting the ball close. And I'll show you some of the trouble around each green when I show some holes. Just very difficult ball striking conditions at this golf course. And then very tough conditions around the green, one of the top 6 toughest over the last 4 years. I think that's a combination of just what is around the green as far as where the bunkers are, and just how fast and difficult it is once you get the ball to the putting surface from off the green. Very hard to stop and control the ball too. So tee to green, very difficult test. Putting, at least the ability to gain strokes on the field, it's not quite as tough. It's very fast. There are some, there's definitely some break to a lot of these putts, but these greens were really true, especially with the new bentgrass surfaces. Ball rolls very nicely on them. So if you have a nice confident putting stroke, you're confident putting on faster bentgrass surfaces, this is the golf course for you. So yeah, the biggest difficulty though, as you can see, is from tee to green. And as I mentioned too, there's a huge missed fairway penalty, kind of like what we saw last week at Colonial with the Bermuda rough. This is more to do with the long, thick nature of the bluegrass, ryegrass, and fescue rough, and just how difficult and how much trouble there is around these greens, specifically with water hazards and just really difficult greenside surrounds. It kind of just compounds on each other. That if you hit a really bad tee shot, you're really putting yourself behind the 8 ball, because it's hard to control the ball out of this rough. It's hard to even get the ball to the green in some cases from this rough. And there's so much trouble around the green that if you do try and get aggressive coming out of this rough and you're just a little bit shorter offline, the penalty strokes can kind of escalate from there. So that's why this is one of the more top 10 biggest missed fairway penalty over the last 4 years in Muirfield Village. One of the top 6 in rough penalty because of how thick that rough is. And then it's relatively high penalty rates from missed fairways as well. It's kind of like with Torrey Pines, this non-rough penalty, that would be bunkers. You're probably better off in some cases being in a bunker because you actually can get clean contact out of it. Now, some of these bunkers, though, are definitely a little challenging as far as, like how deep they are, where the lips are. But kind of like with Torrey, where there's a higher rough penalty, because of how thick and dense the rough is, you're better off being in the bunker. Kind of similar situation with Muirfield Village here. So let's actually show you why, though, in specific holes where you can get in trouble at Muirfield Village. So let's start with the 3rd hole here. This is a short par 4. It's under 300 or under 400 yards. Kind of looks similar to 16 At PJ National, where it's demanding less than driver off the tee, but then you got an approach shot over water to a pretty narrow target. You don't have a lot of room long of the green. It's the challenge here is definitely the approach shot, but off the tee, though, there's a lot of danger here if you are offline with your iron or 3-wood, whatever club you pull to try and get yourself in position A. So pull your tee shot left here. You could rattle around the trees down to the rough, or you got this creek to the left here. So you can rack up a penalty stroke here. Or if you miss right here, you set up a longer approach shot and you're coming out of thick rough and you have to carry it all the way across this water. That's a big carry coming out of thick rough. Like, you better have good, a good lie out of it. So that's and obviously when you're dealing with a long carry over water, especially with some windy conditions, that increases the difficulty of the approach shot. And just, if you miss the green here, there's a lot of ways you can screw that up, especially if you're in one of these bunkers long of the green here. I've seen plenty of guys splash out of the bunkers, and when the greens are rolling pretty quick, everything feeds down to the water. I've definitely seen guys chip it into the water or come out of the bunker into the water there. This is just an example. Even though it's a shorter hole, there is a lot of teeth to this hole to really, really make it difficult for these guys. Here's the 5th hole here. There's a lot going on with this par 5. Only about 540 yards on the scorecard, but don't let the lack of length deceive you, because this is not a driver hole for the most part. It's about 277 to the middle of the fairway here. And it's a long approach shot to this green as well, with water green side, water left, water short. If you go way past the green here, it's really difficult to get up and down because this green can run very fast as well. But if you miss the fairway here, especially right, I see a lot of guys miss right here, and it just creates for some very interesting situations, decisions, what these guys can do. Some guys try and advance the ball up the fairway to set up like a 110-yard shot, but I've seen plenty of guys try and do that and hit the water. Seen a lot of guys try and traverse the hole, go to this opposite fairway over here, and then that's just a long approach shot over water, over a bunker to a very narrow green from this direction. So there's just a lot going on with this hole. It's definitely not necessarily an easy birdie hole. I've seen a lot of guys make messes of this. Scottie Scheffler made a mess of this hole last year. I think he chipped it into the water on his 3rd shot. I think he carded bogey here. So even though it's only 540 yards, there is a lot of ways that if you are not precise with your tee shot, if you're offline with your approach shot, you can definitely rack up some strokes and penalties here on this hole. Here's the 15th hole. This is one we remember as the one Bryson got a 10 on. And there were some significant changes to this hole back in the 2020 renovation. So this tee shot actually, this fairway here was about 20 feet above the player. And then it was a downhill tee shot to the green here. And Jack ended up leveling the hole as part of the renovation. But, so even though it's a little easier of a tee shot because you're not hitting uphill, he had a bunch of bunkers to the right here. And there just isn't really a lot. There's nowhere really to miss on this hole. It's not a very wide landing area here. If you're in these bunkers off the tee, with how far you got to carry it over this water hazard here, you're probably laying up and having a wedge in. If you miss right here, there's a water hazard over here as well that Bryson found himself in. There's out of bounds way over here too that Bryson happened to find himself as well, where he argued with a rules official about how the ball wasn't really out of bounds, even though it was under somebody's fence. Not a great look for him. But yeah, like, again, another stout par 5 with a lot of danger. If you just got to hit 2 really good shots. Otherwise, you run the risk of really racking up the penalty strokes on this hole here. And then the 18th hole, this is an example of a very tough tee shot on the golf course. You have to hit just the perfect fade here, the perfect left to right tee shot. Very easy if the fairways are very firm. You get the ball going a little bit too far left, it'll bounce into the creek. You got pretty deep fairway bunkers here, starting about 294 to the middle, going all the way up 343 to the last one. Pretty narrow landing zone here, and the green side surrounds are pretty severe, pretty difficult to get up and down. I'll show you on this next slide here. This is an older picture. They've done some work to this, but specifically the green, but you can kind of see, the topography hasn't really changed on this hole here. If you miss short left here, you got to, get the ball. You're pretty far below the putting surface here, or if you're in this bunker and you're in really thick rough as well, hard to get up and down here. But if you miss long right here, you're above the green at that point. You're chipping back down to the surface, and especially if the pin's like right here, you get the ball rolling a little too far. There's a false front. Ball might come all the way down the apron here. So, on the Sunday pin over here, it's on this top shelf. That's a really small target. So, overall, I mean, this is a golf course that punishes sloppiness. And as we go through the leaderboard, you'll see guys who just are really solid ball strikers, really consistent. There's a reason why guys like Scottie Scheffler and Collin Morikawa and, God forbid, Patrick Cantlay, when he wasn't just a complete stooge. These guys were just pretty reliable, pretty consistent, not the flashiest players, but they got the job done at the end of the day. They've had a lot of success at this golf course. Obviously, you think about guys who are pretty good with left to right shots, like Rahm and Morikawa, Scottie, and Hovland even, because Jack designs his golf course a lot, with a lot of holes where even though he says he tries to favor, working the ball both ways, you still see a lot of pivotal tee shots and approach shots where you got to hit a nice fade. Those guys are pretty successful here, but you just think, I'll go through the leaderboard, but just guys are pretty steady, great ball strikers. It's going to really punish your misses here. Definitely not one where you just blast it and boot it around the ballpark and not expect to get punished. It'll eject fakers very quickly at this place. So let's go to the proximity buckets here. Pretty clearly defined. This has been the last 3 years, and this is post renovation as well, where they added yardage to the scorecard. So it's a good representation of what to expect this week. There's a little less than average from between 125 and 175. There's a lot, pretty high volume of shots from over 175 to 2 plus this week. So that's a key area to target on. There's a little higher than average proximity between 100 and 125 for the most part, though, kind of like what we see at Sawgrass. Even though between 125 and 175, it's technically less than average. This is a golf course that definitely tests you through the bag. There's still a pretty even dispersion. If you want to lump the less than 100-yard shot with the 100, 125 shots, your wedges basically, about 16-17% come from about under 125, about 15% between 125 and 150, about 17 to 18% between 150 and 175, about 17% between 175 200, and then about 20 or about 30% of your shots, between over 200. That includes your par fives, which it's a par 72. I think there's 1 or 2 par threes that might be over 200 yards as well. So it just is a golf course that is demanding and tests you through the bag. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that it's not just a huge concentration just in all long irons or all short irons. I appreciate that you got to be good at pretty much everything in the bag. And, again, I mentioned some guys who are premium iron players like Hovland and Morikawa and Scheffler and Rahm. And, there's a reason why those guys are just great here. And it really lets you shine. If you're somebody who finds a lot of fairways and you're a really good iron player, you can have a really good week here because you're just solid throughout the bag. So I like seeing this even dispersion on this proximity bucket chart here. As far as correlated golf courses go, no real big surprise. We're talking about golf courses with pretty big missed fairway penalty, rewards, more solid combination of distance and length off the tee than not just power and just trying to overpower a place. You look at golf courses like Concession Golf Club. That's another Jack Nicklaus. That's actually the #1 most correlated golf course to Muirfield Village, at least course they played recently since 2020 in data golf. East Lake, TPC Twin Cities, Innisbrook, Royal Troon, which I love Royal Troon. That's, look at some of the leaderboard that's done well, like Justin Rose and Billy Horschel and Xander. You think about those guys. Scottie did well that week. You think about those guys did well there. Very Muirfield Village type golf course or type leaderboard. They saw that open versus what you come to expect here. Sedgefield, Albany, TBC Deer Run, Seattle, and TBC Sawgrass, like I mentioned. So, courses where power helps everywhere, but it doesn't necessarily help you at these golf courses. More about avoiding trouble, having good iron play. A lot of these courses too have a lot of, you can definitely recommend penalty strokes like TBC Twin Cities, a lot of water on that golf course. It's no surprise here. Here's where I really like this tournament from a handicap perspective, though. I don't usually put the skill set chart here, but what I like seeing, and maybe I'll pull out the curtain, is when I look at golf courses, I love trying to match the predictive skill sets to what actually separates yourself in the tournament. And normally when you see something that's very predictive to success, like a golfer attribute, like let's say like accurate guys, which can be a pretty difficult stat to try and be predictive because, you don't ever know if guys are going to drive it well in any given day. But, if that's something that's definitely a little more predictive to success, and then I see that your ability to hit fairways in the tournament can separate yourself a lot more in the tournament than those that just are booting it around everywhere. I love seeing that. And here you see the predictive skill set chart, distance, much lower correlation to success. Basically, it doesn't mean that a longer hitter can't do well here. We've seen longer hitters do very well. It's just that it's a mixed bag. It's not a course where just the short guys, you just write them off at that point. You could see a top 10 where you got some bombers and short guys. Like there just isn't a big correlation at that point. But for the most part, most of the guys that tend to do pretty well at Muirfield Village tend to be guys who find a lot of fairways, and we'll go through the leaderboard. That definitely is a theme. Pretty high correlation here. Guys tend to be pretty good iron players. Again, I went through the proximity buckets with everybody that, it's not just concentrated in one particular area. It kind of tests you all through the bag in Muirfield Village. So guys who tend to be really solid iron players generally are just good through the bag. That's a pretty big characteristic of guys, or predictive guys do well here. Guys are really good around the green. Again, one of the toughest around the green conditions on the PGA Tour, which kind of flies a little bit in the face when you have guys like Hovland do very well, and even Morikawa when he was doing very well wasn't very good around the green. But generally those types of guys are pretty good here. And then putting, because sometimes I feel like when you get to really fast greens with a lot of break to it, guys can maybe putt a little more defensively. There's a little bit less of a correlation of guys who are really good putters versus not good putters. Some of those bad putters can have a good week or just not lose as many strokes to the field because, it's a little different animal as far as on the greens this week. So keep this predictive skill set in mind where distance is not as important, but finding guys who tend to find fairways, pretty good with their irons, and good around the green tend to find more success here. This leads me to the last couple leaderboards. So last year, another week where Scottie Scheffler took my lunch and ruined my week because I had Morikawa on the week, and Morikawa played great, but Scottie won this tournament at 8 under, hit a 5-footer at the end for par, a really nice up and down to get the win for him. Last year, I remember greens were just like in 2023, greens were very firm. Last year, it was a really difficult ball striking contest. You really had to, find fairways in the week, have really good control of your irons, because just if you're hitting from the rough, it was kind of like with Colonial when the greens got really fast this week and firm, ball would just run through. And you notice with the within event correlations, there was actually a negative correlation to how you did distance, how far you hit it off the tee in the tournament, to its contribution to your strokes gain off the tee. I mean, strokes gain off the tee was harder to separate yourself in the tournament with that category, which it usually is here. But just looking at the leaderboard here, The guys who hit the farthest actually did worse in that category. That's what the negative correlation suggests here. And you see, like, this leaderboard, Scottie, not the longest hitter. He's got adequate length, but on the week he wasn't hitting as long. But Morikawa, Hadwin, Christian, Bezadenhout, definitely I bet he was one of my only successful bets this week. And to see like Brian Harman and shorter hitters on number 2 this week cut the corner with the downwind. And I'm seeing Christian Bezadenhout just hit it 270 to the middle of the fairway and have 100 yards into that green every single time. Like, this is why you're Christian Bezadenhout. This is why you don't win. This is why you just finish T30 or T40 every single week, because everybody else on a hole where they're hitting it right next to the green, you're still playing like it's 1992 and at 270 and settling for a wedge. Anyways, that apparently works at this golf course where you just keep it in front of you. And if you're a good iron player like he was at the time, you can still put up a pretty good score. So, Sepp Straka is not the longest hitter. Sung Jae, Hideki's lost a lot of distance over the years. But the biggest theme, you get some longer hitters too, but the biggest theme, though, is like most of these guys are pretty good iron players. Most of them hit a lot of fairways, like your Sepps and Bezadenhouts and Hadwins and Morikawas and Schefflers, and Xander was driving, like, he didn't hit a lot of fairways last year, but Xander was driving it really good last year. Same thing with Tony Finau coming in as well. And you see that, though, there's a less importance on off the tee in tournament, but a little higher on accuracy. But in tournament, the way to separate yourself was with your iron play and around the green, and less so with the putting. So go back to this chart here. So you saw where accuracy mattered a little more towards your strokes gained off the tee for the week. That matches the predictive skill set chart. Iron play in tournament, separate yourself a lot more than the normal PGA Tour stop. That matches the predictive skill set chart. And around the green play in tournament, separate yourself more in tournament too. Again, matches the predictive skill chart. And putting was not a good way to separate yourself in tournament. Matches the skill set chart. So that's why I like this tournament, where I see matches with the predictive skill set chart, and I see matches with how you separate yourself in tournament. I love seeing that. Big correlations there. It really helps you identify, when you're looking at the entire board, what you really want for the week. It's not situations where I've been with tournaments where, like, really good iron players are expected to do well this week, but iron play, it's hard to separate yourself. It's kind of hard to square the two. This is not the case this week. For the most part, everything that you do in tournament normally matches a particular type of player that is good at it. So love seeing that. Same thing in 2023 as well. This one's definitely more of a driving contest. You were able to separate yourself a lot more off the tee than the regular PGA Tour steps. I think it's because the fairways were so firm in 2023. Everything was firm in 2023. So guys who just drove it really good on the week were able to hit a lot of fairways. You got a lot more distance off it too, because if you kept the ball in the short grass, it would just roll for a while. In tournament off the tee play was definitely a little more important, but you can see, though, accuracy was more important than distance on the week. And then a big skew in importance of approach play and around the green play, way less with putting. Again, that's very similar to the predictive skill set chart. That suggests, like, guys tend to hit a lot of fairways, guys are really good irons, guys really good around the green. That was then rewarded in the tournament. So you like seeing that here. Love this tournament for a lot of reasons. I had Hovland that week, beating Denny McCarthy in the playoff there, fighting up Scottie Scheffler as well. This was where we were talking about with Scottie, like, all right, things are really bad with the putter here. He had one of the best tee to green weeks, I think, like, in tournament, drove it great, and he lost 8 strokes putting on the week. Like, this was one that's got, like, as a Hovland better, we got lucky that Scottie putt that poorly. This also was a tournament, by the way, that Morikawa played really well, but he had a back spasm. Excuse me. He had a back spasm before the round and actually withdrew. Screwed a lot of people, by the way. A lot of people had him in DFS. I had a top 10 prop on him. He was solidly in top 10. That screwed everybody, but Hovland's a big community bet on the week, and you got rewarded that way. So maybe it was karma from that standpoint. And then 2022, this is when Billy Horschel basically ran away with it. He kind of ended this on Saturday. I think he was up 5 heading into Sunday. He had it got really windy on Saturday, and he just played great on the week. And this was also off the heels of he was not hitting the ball well. I don't know if this wasn't the one where he cried because that might have been 2024 where he was a former winner just hitting it bad. He had a bad miscut though at Colonial. And I don't think many people were on him that way. There probably were some people on Horschel, but he got a really bad performance at Colonial and be like, all right, well, he's probably toast, and comes back at 2 weeks later, drives a great, hits a lot of fairways, great iron on the week. So beats Aaron Wise by 4. This was one of the last relevant Aaron Wise performances before he unfortunately basically stopped being a pro golfer because of mental health issues. That's pretty sad. Beats Patrick Cantlay. I am pretty confident. I probably had a bet on Patrick Cantlay on the week, and that didn't hit. Also beat Joaquin Niemann at 7 under. I'm pretty sure I had a bet on Joaquin Niemann because those are two guys that just love betting and love losing money on. Although not on live. I'm pretty successful betting Niemann on live. But as you can see, similar to the 2024 tournament, this one definitely not as predictable as far as like off the tee. But again, like big importance in approach play, big importance around the green, lack of importance, at least compared to PG Tour venues in putting. Again, matches the predictive skill set chart. So if you just look at like the data golf chart that you can access there, those skill sets that they tend to favor as being highly correlated are generally rewarded. So it makes it kind of easy to, when you got the giant landscape of looking at all the golfers and picking different attributes of what you want to do, it's pretty easy to pick out guys who are pretty good in those particular skill sets are probably going to be pretty good here. So that's a Muirfield Village preview. So let's actually go to the odds board now. This is actually the first time I'm looking at the odds board on the week. And no surprise here, we're not going to break on Scottie Scheffler. There's no Rory in the field to be like 6-1 as well. So Scottie is plus 270. And last week, that was the without Scottie market craze. I pretty much saw almost everybody in our Discord bet without Scottie markets. And, Scottie didn't win. I wonder it's probably not going to happen. I'm going to guess people are going to double down on the without Scottie markets this week, because this is not an example of a golf course or a situation where I see, okay, well, play the without Scottie markets last week at a golf course that was set up for him. He didn't win, play well, but didn't win. Maybe I feel kind of good about betting the regular market. And then me being the contrarian be like, well, how about I'm just going to single bullet Scottie? I don't see that. I think people are still going to go back to without Scottie markets this week. But if you're not interested in doing that, top of the board here, you got Xander 15-1, JT 18-1, Collin 18-1, Patrick Cantlay 19-1. For somebody who has an addiction of betting Patrick Cantlay, seeing the 19-1 is spinning up a crazy narrative in my head of what do the books know? Why is he 19-1? I must bet this right now. I got to get my bump again and fall off the wagon. I don't know. I'm sure everybody would love to see that again. That Boston Kepper yelled at me for 5 minutes on Tuesday when he returns from the show. I'm not. Look, it's with Cantlay this week. It's like how I approached getting screwed on the weather on Saturday. That was just horribly wrong, and not factoring in that they would water the greens in anticipation of that weather report and it not being as severe, and guys just kind of ate up Colonial on Saturday and going only 1-2 on my round score overs. I'm just going to accept that it happened. I'm going to, and if Cantlay does win, and I'm not on this week, I'm just going to accept it and move on, because I just cannot do this myself again. I will probably bet him top 10 because I'm a loser, and I need to have something on Mr. Cantlay, but I will not be betting him outright. I'll be betting some other losers. Ludwig here, who, like, he's got some good finishes here. Drives a great, like, as far as what he's doing off the tee, like, that's not a concern. His irons are a big concern though, and he's really sloppy like around the green with the irons, and I expected him at Quail, I think, to kind of wake up, and he didn't. And I'm always terrified because I love Ludwig. But at 20-1, with how sloppy he's been and how much sloppiness is kind of punished at Muirfield Village, probably stay away. Of the guys up here, I mean, it's probably going to be chalk, but Morikawa, with just how successful he's been here. I'll have to look at the weather report, see if there's anything really crazy that's going to happen. But I mean, look, just made for this golf course, just like Scottie, just premium iron player, great, hits a lot of fairways, consistent, even though, length is not the most important thing here. It's mostly just keeping the ball in front of you, staying out of trouble. Morikawa does that almost better than anybody. So that's definitely tempting. 18-1. Fleetwood did what he always did here. Like Colonial, but hits the ball great. Should be pretty good here. I don't think I'm gonna bet him outright, but positional maybe, because I love to get kicked in the nuts with these guys. Hovland, Hovland's been driving the ball a lot better. Like at Quail, definitely went awry for him over the weekend. But with Hovland, I remember back at Innisbrook, people loved him because, he can't take the driver out of his hands, on a lot of these holes. You can kind of do that here at Muirfield Village. Like the average driving distance is only about 288 or so. There's a lot of holes where you do have to play more positional. So that works in Hovland's favor. Obviously, he's great here. He has a win here. Seems like he's comfortable around the green here. Maybe he's just as good at golf course with a lot of thick rough, and it's really difficult for everybody. Maybe that brings everybody to the pack to him. So seeing him at 35-1, interesting to say the least. Listen, Shane Lowry almost won a tournament a couple weeks ago. Like, talk about what he's good at. He's pretty solid ball striker. That could be, depending on the number. We'll see. Hideki's starting to show a lot of flashes too. I mean, he submarine on the back nine today, but he was up there for a little bit. He was top 5 heading into the final round at Philly Cricket Club. So he might be starting to round back into shape. Maybe, people are maybe still off him a little bit heading into this week. We'll see. We got Siwoo Kim playing good golf at the moment. I'm not really all concerned about what happened at Colonial. He's never been good there for whatever reason. But, you look at some of the comp courses and some of the courses he's been good at. This would be a fit for him. Listen, I mean, this is a good Sepp Straka course. I think Matt Fitzpatrick is definitely going to be on the tip chart this week because he's playing a lot better, but he's been great here. A lot of top 10s. He just is really good to get up and down. His iron play has been great. Driving hasn't been as good. Like, he's gaining a little bit, but it's been better than what it was, but it's not great. But he's been really good here. Robert McIntyre played great this week. That's a golfer that I know earlier in the year he was driving it far and also hit a lot of fairways, but like driving it really good. Like that sets you up for so much success here when you drive it so good. So I think that's somebody to look at, maybe 60-1. I don't know. That's probably about it. I mean, like at these signature events, I try not to get too cute with it. It's usually top of the board or somebody that I think, has done well in big events, either done well here. I tend not to get too crazy with the outright board at the signatures. Tends to be just the big boys that I've seen, mostly win these things. So that's probably where I'm going to limit the card. I'm probably not going to go past like 70-1 is my guess. So, all right. Well, that's it. Like I said, short and sweet. Boston Capper will be back on Tuesday. And, look, it's not a happy Memorial Day. I think it's more of a, appreciation this week for everybody who served, that lost their lives. Everyone has somebody who has served in the military, and, we're lucky to still have them. But, Memorial Day is for the ones that unfortunately died for our country. And tomorrow, as you're grilling or sweating your bets, definitely take some time to think about the ones that died to defend your freedom on Memorial Day tomorrow. and can, help make this country stay great. So with that, thank you for joining me tonight. And we'll be back on Tuesday for the betting show for the memorial. So thanks. Have a great night.